Hello, I'm Phil Svitek, 360 Creative Coach, and normally it is both my pleasure and my mission to highlight my creative journey in hopes of giving you inspiration and specific takeaways, all with the intent of making your life a little bit easier. But given recent events, this episode is going to be different. So in this episode, I'm going to kind of recount my experiences with the LA wildfires. And first and foremost, I am safe, and luckily I'm very grateful, and I'm both very lucky that nothing of true significance really happened to me, right? I cannot say the same for a lot of people I know, whether it's being evacuated, whether it's losing their homes. Like I pretty much guarantee that within LA, anyone knows someone affected in one way, shape, or form by these wildfires. And as of right now, they're not all contained. So that certainly leaves unknown factors about, what's to come and stuff like that. But the good news is, with the help of many states, both Canada and Mexico, we have the resources that when smaller fires crop up, that ultimately they're put out, right? So that's definitely encouraging for the time being. But I wanted to kind of share my experiences and give you a rundown of, almost like day one to, here today of like kind of what's been going on. And then look at the larger picture of things, try to do some lessons out of this, or if not lessons, then, action steps, right? And I don't mean to be like, let's always look on the bright side of things and stuff like that, but there's also a reality to, we all have to move forward in one way, shape, or form. And so what does that look like, right? Myself included, as I mentioned, people that are far more affected than I was and things like that. And there's just a lot to process. And so, I hope that by sharing this experience, if anything, I don't know, you learn something, but at the very least for me, it was, I felt like it was worthwhile to at least like video journal this whole thing, just to have as, I don't know, keepsake almost seems like a weird word, but just to remember this moment in time, and so forth. So let's go back to the beginning. The Palisades fire was the first one. That's the first one that I kind of got wind of, right? There was also the Malibu fire, which was very tragic and things of that nature, for sure. But the Palisades fire being on Tuesday, that was sort of the big one that, I started kind of getting to know stuff. And I didn't really know too much until way later in the day. For me, that Tuesday was very much business as usual, and to some degree, you get a wind of certain things of like, oh, there's a fire, and us in California, sadly, fires aren't anything new. And so you're kind of like, okay, well, that's sad. But I'm sure they could put this out or whatever. But it wasn't until the evening time that it really, came to fruition of like, oh, wow, this is more dire than anticipated, right? And part of that was also, even my own experience of like just talking with friends of just the winds themselves, right? Like I kid you not. So I live in an apartment building, and you would think that the apartment building was going through an earthquake based on the force of the wind just, beating against the apartment building. And same thing for my friends, in various places, like they experience this. We kind of joked. And by the way, when I say joked, we all need some levity and stuff, and we all have gallows humor, and that's a way of kind of getting through certain hardships of life. So I think laughter is important. But we were talking about essentially how she lives on a very hilly area in Burbank, and it was almost like Dorothy, Wizard of Oz type stuff, where you'd have neighbors come out in their backyard, and there'd be a jungle gym in their backyard, and they'd be like, whose jungle gym is this? Because it's not like they had the jungle gym. It literally just blew from somewhere else, from someone else's property, and the jungle gym is there. Like, that's the kind of winds we're talking about. And this is very emblematic of a lot of people's experiences, and it's not just like isolated or mine or just a few people. Like, this is, when you talk to most people, they will have a story to share about just the winds themselves and, how frightening those were. A friend of mine had texted me of, it was almost like someone knocking on her door very loudly trying to get in the whole night. Part of that also, for people, right? Our power lines are above ground. And so, what freaks people out a lot of times is when the power goes out. But, in some sense, it's actually a good thing because it means they're being preventative, right? So by turning off the power, if the wind comes and knocks down a power line, it's not going to spark into a fire because there's no electricity there, right? The power's out. So in that sense, it can be good. But again, when you're sort of in your house and, have no power, obviously no internet, things of that nature, you're kind of left to your own devices and, it's like, what do you do? And obviously, people have flashlights and things of that nature, but certainly it's disruptive to say the least. And then to have that wind just like literally be banging on your door, conflates everything. So it's wild. And, I remember sort of the next day as we were kind of touching base with various friends about what was going on and trying to figure stuff out, some friends were asking me, why couldn't they fly helicopters or drones and stuff like that? And it's like, you can't, it's insane. And I mean, even if you could, right, part of it is as you dump water into these wildfires, the wind's just going to take it every which way. So you have to like anticipate for the wind. And how the hell do you do that? Because it's going to, you're going to dump all these, gallons and gallons of water onto something else, not the fire. So it's, that really hurt us in the first day, was just these insane winds, and whatnot. So day 2, Wednesday, I actually had scheduled a therapy appointment. So I was like, okay, I'll go to that. This will be beneficial. And overall, my sort of mentality was stay vigilant, but don't panic, right? And that's kind of how, for the most part, I operated throughout the day to the extent that I could, but other people around me, that you could tell that they were getting tense, and, some of it rightfully so, like, depending on where you were, obviously you could be far closer to the fires, you could be farther from the fires, but nonetheless, like, just based off of everything, it was scary, and certainly it's one of those, like, when I talk about like staying vigilant, but not panicked, especially in that time, you're on day 2 of this, like if you watch the news, I'm not saying it's inaccurate to talk about the scope and size of this tragic event, but at the same time, you'd be believed to think that like all of LA is literally on fire, and that's not the case. Like it's dire, it's very tragic, but it's also there's pockets, and it's not like everything is literally on fire. But that induces a certain, like, just in general, that whole notion of when we just watch the news, like we just let that seep into us and control our emotions. We're not, we give our power away to that, and then, we turn into a fight or flight mode. And again, I'm not blaming anyone, for that sort of response. It's in some cases like a justified response, like it's, in that moment when you're going through it, that certainly it's one of those like easier said than done type of moments, but, I went to therapy, and that was good because it helped calm me in general. And that night, I was actually supposed to see this movie called Paprika. It's an animated movie. It came out in the 2000s. It's one of, I think it's literally Satoshi Kon's last movie before his untimely death. And it's one of my favorite movies. Marissa had never seen it. It was playing in theaters, so we were supposed to see that. And I remember getting a text from her, saying that she'd rather not go to the movie theaters. And then I looked it up, in all the movie theaters, and kind of basically everything was preemptively shut down, even if it wasn't in the line of fire, both literally and metaphorically. And because it obviously is a movie that's been out for many, many years, I said, okay, well, why don't I bring the Blu-ray, and we'll just watch it at your place and, make the best of all of this. And she lives in Hollywood, sort of right by the Hollywood Bowl. And I say this because, we're about like 30 minutes into this whole thing. It's a very trippy movie. There's a lot going on. It's like on the level of Inception. I say that very deliberately because Inception borrowed a lot of concepts from Paprika. But all the same, I could tell that Marissa was just not paying attention, not really quite processing it. Like, she was constantly checking her phone and whatever. And, she just couldn't settle in, to any sort of like sense of, just relaxation, right? For lack of a better term. And then lo and behold, all of a sudden, there's an evacuation notice that both her and I get because of the Sunset Fire, which was on Runyon Canyon. So, she would say that she's justified in her sort of worries. I try to be of the mindset that, like, well, listen, we got the alert, and so now we're going to act on the alert. But, before then, we don't need to, again, sort of panic. But again, it's not to say who's right, who's wrong. It's just kind of highlighting just the range of what people are processing through, right? Like, we're both emblematic of a certain spectrum. And again, I'm not saying like I'm the stoic end all be all, because I'll talk about that. A week into this, I went back to therapy, and I'll talk about that. So minor kind of tease, but the point being, we get this alert, and it's like, okay, it's time to go. And so I'm helping her kind of pack. At the same time, I'm calling various friends in the area to figure out with them of are they being evacuated? What's going on? What do they need? And then, 5 minutes into Marissa packing, something just hits me. I'm like, I was like, not to rush you, but we should go. And the reason I said this was not because of the fires necessarily. I wasn't as worried about that in terms of the immediate danger. I was more so worried that we would get stuck in gridlock. The day before, with the Palisades fire, people were literally going, and it just became a nightmare. And so they got out of the cars and left, and firefighters had to bulldoze their way through these cars. And so that was sort of in my mind. So I was like, okay, get what you need, but let's also kind of make haste. So we did that, and we were out probably within 10 to 15 minutes, give or take. And at that point, luckily she's very close to kind of, the freeway and plenty of side streets to get out of there. But even just to get from her place to those locations, was a complete shit show. It was insane. It was bumper to bumper, just insanity in that regard. And so it took me, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes just to get a few blocks. But luckily, we were able to do so. I as we were in all this traffic, I kept calling people and stuff like that. to figure out where they're at, what they needed, where they were going. And so with Marissa, we ended up going to my place, and essentially her crashing on the couch and, whatever else. And so luckily everyone that I'd known, they, even if they weren't like quote unquote being evacuated outright, they just took the precaution, to get out, because again, they just didn't want to be stuck in there. And, as was the case with the Palisades fire, with the Sunset one, same thing where, certain people, like, they were just so gridlocked that they had to like get out of the car, and essentially, firefighters had to like bulldoze their way through a lot of these cars. So, in that sense, I mean, that's what happened. And so, the next day we sort of wake up pretty early. I'm sure it was a pretty much restless night for Marissa. But luckily they had contained the fire from spreading, and they were just kind of putting out all the embers. And I guess this is a kind of good moment. I mean, as far as I understand, like, I'm not some sort of fire expert, not necessarily, but when they talk about containment, they're both talking about putting out the fire as much as possible, right? Like, you see the flames and they want to put that out. But even when you put that out, right, there's the embers of, what had been on fire. And so they have to kind of go through and make sure like all of those are extinguished and safe and so forth. So when we talk about like containment, that's kind of really what they're talking about. And so for the most part, like, the flames of the Sunset fire by the next day were good. And they were just kind of making sure that all the embers and stuff like that were good to go as well. But, to ease her mind, I was like, okay, we'll just hop in my car and, we'll just go to your apartment. Now the mistake Marissa made was, we're driving through there and, obviously things are safe and whatever. So that was a big sigh of relief. But I was like, okay, like, we're here, if you want to go back up and get some more stuff, just go do it. And she had forgotten her key. So I was like, all right, well, obviously that's not going to work, but it is what it is, at least, like, she felt a lot, I wouldn't say safe, like the panic was still there, but, she felt relief that, she had a home to go back to, and that nothing ultimately ended up being endangered. But, so given that we didn't know, how long she'd be evacuated for and whatever else, we went to get supplies from the grocery store, things of that nature. And one of my plans was to go to one of our mutual friends, named JJ. She has a dog named Rue. Rue and my foster Diamond, they're thick as thieves. For clarity, Diamond was adopted, but when I had Diamond as a foster, they would spend a lot of time together. Anyway, so JJ's someone, she has a good sized place, big TV, has all the all the streaming apps and stuff like that, plus Rue. So I was like, okay, we could go there. Marissa can watch TV, kind of play with the dog and just sort of relax, right? Plus, JJ being JJ, Marissa adores JJ. So it felt like this would be a good sort of form of relief for Marissa. So we went over there, and I'd bought, just like a Ralph's chicken, to like anticipate, like, hey, we're going to go over there. Might as well bring something to eat. We'll all have lunch, So it was like, okay, for lunch, we could do, the chicken and rice with some vegetables. And then for dinner, we could do the chicken with like pasta, right? And that was kind of the game plan. So we're there, and it brought, quote unquote, some sense of normalcy. But, again, it was one of those things that poor Marissa was like just glued to the news and stuff like that. And, everything's horrific and stuff like that. And again, I'm not downplaying. I'm not. I don't know. It's one of those that to spend time on. Like there's also this app called Watch Duty, which has, brilliant information. But if you literally went on it, it would look like all of LA is on fire because of like all the red flag warnings and this and that. Like it's just all color coded in different ways. And so, you would look at that and it's just giving you heart palpitations based on it. It's a very useful app. I'm not denying it. It's just, again, some of these things, it's just not healthy to be glued to it. But we had lunch and so forth. And, then we started finally kind of easing into the day of, okay, let's just watch Friends. Let's just enjoy, something like mindless, something that we've seen all collectively and we can just have a good laugh at. And it was, we literally started Friends from season 1, episode 1. And, it was just very nostalgic to be like, wow, look how young they are. And, he had a good chuckle. And then a few episodes into this thing, we all get a warning on our phone to evacuate. And, it's one of those like moments of like, someone ends up telling you like, I told you so, see, we should have been watching the news. And it's like, well, we got the notice. So it's like, it's not terrible. We just got the notice. But yeah, that's when it was sort of, even for me, overwhelming in the sense that, okay, we get this notice. We kind of, in that moment, you're trying to get information as much as you can to understand the situation, right? Of, what's happening, where you're supposed to go, create an action plan, but you're also doing it very quickly, right? So, we looked and, there's a new fire called the Kenneth Fire, and it's actually not too far from me, where I live. And so, we essentially looked at each other of like, okay, if JJ's place is being evacuated, then all of us, like my place is certainly being evacuated because I'm way closer to that than JJ. So it was like, okay, so game plan. We're going to help pack JJ's stuff, especially because she's got the dog and stuff like that. We know I gotta, at that point in time, it's like, okay, we know I gotta get evacuated. So, I gotta go there and pack my stuff. And then it's like, okay, let's not dilly-dally too much about where to necessarily go. Like I had, people in Santa Barbara that I knew that I could essentially find refuge in. So it was like, okay, I got on the horn with them and, many people offered a place to stay, but it was like, okay, here's the closest location. Like, let's just go there and we'll regroup. We'll figure it all out from there. Of who's going to go where and blah, blah, blah. But like, now we have like a destination to at least just catch our breath, so to speak. So JJ's packing up her car, things of that nature. I'm on my way to my place to pack up my stuff. And as we're going, lo and behold, we find out that the alarm was a bit of a false alarm, right? In the sense that JJ didn't need to be evacuated. I didn't need to be evacuated. It was more so for the people kind of, pardon the expression, it's, but because it's literal in this sense, the people in the line of fire of the Kenneth Fire, those were the people being evacuated. All the same now, for essentially my team, at this point, rightfully, you understandably, right? They were panicked in the sense of like, they just felt, even though we weren't needed to be evacuated, they wanted some sense of safety and kind of live in as much of a stress-free zone as possible. And, kind of backtracking too, like at that point, when you looked at the Watch Duty app, I was at the epicenter of like 5 fires. So you had the Palisades fire making its way towards us. You had the Kenneth fire. We didn't know which way that was going to go. It could have gone west. It could have gone east. And if it's going east, that means it's coming towards me. There's the Hearst fire, which is towards like Porter Ranch. And that's coming south towards me. And then there was, a day before actually, there was, a Woodley fire, which is not too far from me, but luckily they managed to put that out pretty quickly, but that was also there, right? So, it's just this epicenter of like fires. In situations like this, it really is one of those things like if you're already prone to anxiety, this is going to take you up to the nth degree. And even if you're, cool by nature, this is still going to kind of mess with you, right? So we were still going to stick to our game plan of going to Santa Barbara. So we got to my place, and at least the benefit of not having to be immediately evacuated was, okay, I could take my time of like, okay, what do we need to pack, and stuff like that. And then, the interesting part is, I knew the checklist of like, okay, grab your passport, your documents, like that stuff's easy. That stuff's like, here's what it is, and do you have it or not, right? It's very binary in that way. But then when you get to like just something like clothes, it's like, okay, well, what am I packing for, right? How many days and like, what am I going to be doing, right? And so that was like a very strange experience. I grabbed stuff that I was like, okay, I'm not obviously going to like fancy dinners. I don't need business suits and this and that. I was like, okay, let me like grab sort of more utilitarian stuff of like workout gear and stuff that like I can, be flexible in, comfortable in, blah, blah, blah. So that way, like, if stuff happens, if I need to do something, like, we're good, I'm not, like I said, wearing the fancy stuff. But, so we packed my car, whatnot, and then, there is a strange feeling that when you lock your door, for me, it's like, okay, it's a very high probability that my place will be safe. But in that moment, there is that sort of pause of, this could be the last time I enter this space, like it's just the thought that goes through your head. And I know I'm not the only one that kind of felt that, and especially for the people that were like outright evacuated, that's even more of a real moment of just, there goes the key, you're closing the door, and it's like, well, goodbye, place that I call home, you can be here, you can not. And for some people, the reality was it's not there. So yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. But, regardless, we drove to Santa Barbara, where my two friends, Jennifer Freed and her partner Ren, they welcomed us. They had like pizza and chicken parm and salad waiting for us. So that was very nice of them. And they're very warm and sweet people. I knew like for Marissa especially would just give her some reprieve. So that was good. And for me, like, I was able to unpack the car and kind of have stuff there. And because of the nature of how everything was packed, it was kind of everything, just grab and go type of thing. And so, it allowed me a chance to kind of reshuffle things much, much better. So I was able to do that. And funny enough, my friends Daryl and Dorinda had called me, and it's one of those, like, even though we were all on the phone, it ended up being like we were all sort of just hanging out just on the phone. We talked for like, I think an hour and 30 at the bare minimum, and just unpacking everyone's experience and just laughing about certain stuff and whatever else. So it was, that was good. Now, ironically, one thing I want to point out about this day. So we're in day 3. This is Thursday. my friend Ian had called me because, he's planning to stay. He's coming in February towards the end. And he had called the Magic Castle, to, I guess, just confirm his reservation, check in on something. I don't quite know, but he was like, I've been trying to call them all day. I don't understand why they're not picking up. I'm like, Ian, do you not know what's going on? He's like, what do you mean? Why do you sound like that? It sounds serious. What's going on? I'm like, Ian, LA is on fire. And the Magic Castle and so forth, because of the Sunset Fire, everything's gotten evacuated. So, that's why you're not getting a call back. He's like, oh my gosh, I did not know, and then he felt so bad. I'm like, Ian, and it's tough because, when I talk about that sort of notion of wanting to ultimately be calm and stuff like that, for anyone you're talking to outside of LA, right? So whether it's my friend Ian or, my mom or, some of my cousins in Slovakia had reached out, and it's like you want to be truthful about the situation without causing them panic, right? Because again, at least us in LA, if you're watching the news, of these various areas and kind of, okay, which parts are safe and which not. But if you're someone outside of LA, right, and you're just watching the footage of these insane flames, you would think all of LA is literally on fire and, no one's safe. So, I found that to be a difficult task to just, both convey the nature of the reality without, also passing on any sort of panic to them. And I'm not sure I did it correctly at all, but, I tried to, just paint the picture as best I could and give context, a lot of which ended up being long-winded and so forth, but I don't know. That was a difficult part, for sure. All right, so then we get to day 4, which is Friday, and it felt like a little bit of whiplash in that, you wake up in this very calm place. Meanwhile, that is not the reality for a lot of my friends and things like that. And throughout this whole thing, I've been in touch with anyone whose contact I have on my phone that's from LA, I texted and so forth, are you okay? Do you need anything? And in that moment, we're all trying to be there for each other in the ways that we can, which is difficult because sometimes you don't even know your own situation, again, who's going to be evacuated, who's not, that type of thing. And some people were literally being evacuated, so other people already were evacuated, but we're all trying to do the best for each other we can to make sure that, everyone has what they need, in that sense. And it didn't matter, friend or foe. It was like, listen, if I know you, we're in a state of emergency, so I'm gonna check in, type of thing, So knowing that, and then waking up in this gorgeous house in this gorgeous neighborhood, there was a bit of a okay, a disconnect, and in some sense, obviously you're relieved, but in others, it's I wouldn't call it survivor's guilt, but something akin to that, right? So essentially, now that we were afforded the ability to essentially just regroup, I had made the decision. It was okay, well, if I can keep my stuff here, knowing that it's safe, I'll take just stuff I need on me, then I could go back and be of service, to friends and stuff like that, and just the community in general. And worst case, I know that I could go back out to Santa Barbara, if I truly needed to, right? If it really got unsafe to actually be in LA, then yes, I had a place to go. But for the time being, having that mobility and the weight of having to worry about, my truly important stuff, having it be safe, Santa Barbara, then it was okay, that was a weight off my shoulders. So I was able to return back to LA. Funny enough, I have a friend named Wahab who is a reporter in Santa Barbara, and she learned that I was in Santa Barbara, so she asked to like interview me. And I don't know. In situations like that, like, it's not that I mind being interviewed, but something like this, I didn't want to make it about me and stuff like that. And especially since I was very well off, relatively speaking. So, but I did the interview, and I wanted to like really keep it focused on, as much as possible to be of help. And, it's one of those things like, yeah, the mindset is like, it's still very much ongoing. There's a lot of unknowns. And, every day you're hearing, potential deaths, but also the destruction of property, from the fires, things like that. And while there's a number associated with that, like whatever it is, it doesn't spell the true picture of the environmental damage, animals, the emotional weight for people, the cost of rebuilding, the length of rebuilding, all this stuff. And I'll get into, that side of it in terms of, returning to normalcy, if you will, towards the end. But all the same, this is stuff that you're processing kind of throughout it and, whatnot. And it's very difficult, how the hell do you even do that? But anyway, so I did that, and then, I zipped off straight to the Rose Bowl. I had some various stuff that I was like, okay, let me go donate the things that I can, toothbrushes, canned goods, things like that. So I went to the Rose Bowl, and on the one hand, it was very encouraging to see. On the other hand, it's very scary to see that this thing looked like a true military operation. Like, you would think we're going to war. There's so many people there. Cal Fire, just anybody and everybody was there. And, all these like, what would you call them? I guess, for lack of a better term, departments, right? Had like their main trailers. And, there would be a new printout, like this large sheet printout every like 15 minutes of updates on where the fire's at, on all trailer doors, or like protocol of the, what meeting's happening when, and blah, blah, blah. And, everyone's just there, and it's very like by the book and organized, right? So again, in that sense, it's very calming. On the other hand, you realize the large severity of this thing. And, if you've seen the Rose Bowl, if you know the Rose Bowl, like it's a big area, especially with the parking lot and so forth. And this thing's just packed to the brim with people, like it's a whole operation. And then there's also like some various tents for people who had been evacuated. And, it was wild to see like people just walking their dog, and, that being like their new reality of all this. Like, they're living in tents, and, they're with their family and pets, and this is it. This is, life for them at the moment. So, in that sense, that was, very, very eye-opening for sure. Like, it was, yeah, it gave you kind of chills. Like, it's tough to describe that sight, but after having done that and been there, I was essentially driving back towards my place, but I stopped off in Burbank to, see one of my friends, and then the comedy place. I don't know. Words are sometimes failing me right now. But anyway, there's a place called Flappers, and that had decided to kind of, reopen, because a lot of stuff was just preemptively closed. But by Friday, things were kind of, starting to reopen back up. So Flappers was open. And I was like, okay, my friend was performing, so I was like, okay, maybe I could use a good laugh. So I go there, and this is around like 7:30 at night, and then all of a sudden, I start getting texts and calls, and my phone's on silent, but I just see like this onslaught of stuff. So I'm like, okay, I go to the bathroom, And essentially, everyone's like, are you okay? Whatever. And so I check, and it's because there was a major flare up with the winds, and the Palisades fire was starting to encroach towards Encino. Encino was getting evacuated. And Encino's kind of like the town up from me. So, I wasn't worried, necessarily that it would like come straight for me, but two things. Number one, I knew I couldn't sleep well, at my place. And two, I knew I didn't want to get stuck, again, because of the gridlock, if unfortunately worse came to worse. So, I saw my friend Ken as he was, kind of walking through backstage, and, I just told him, I'm like, I gotta go. We hugged each other. He totally understood. So I left. I went back to my place, grabbed my like, the personal belongings that I needed with me, and went to my friend, Lauren's in Toluca Lake. And, luckily she has a spare bedroom, so I was able to stay there. But yeah, I mean, it's strange in many ways. Like, you're essentially kind of couch hopping, and, in those early days, you didn't quite know like how this is all going to go. So luckily on Saturday, I woke up and they managed to, for the most part, contain the fires as much as they could, from going towards Encino and, this other location, right? Because it's a big fire, so the way it spreads and so forth. But anyway, like for the most part, they did a good job, but then you're hearing that, come Tuesday to Thursday, there can be heavy winds. So, and it's just all this stuff, that's kind of, still happening, and a lot of unknowns and variables. And, when I woke up on Saturday, I coordinated with the Emerson soccer team. I tried, like, essentially through all of this, I'm trying to find ways to be as helpful as I can, and make sure that everyone that I can interact with, can be safe, can have stuff. And so I'd gotten in touch with the Emerson soccer team because a lot of our alumni are here, in Los Angeles. So it's like, just trying to make sure that, we're all connected, and everyone knows that ultimately they have a support system, no matter, how large or small people were going through stuff, that they knew that someone could help them out. And it was also at this time that, like, in the first few days, it was very much like running by the seat of your pants type of thing, just doing what was needed. But by this day, it started to kind of take a larger view of stuff. And that's when I just saw, so much misinformation and everyone's hot takes of, everyone was a fire expert and stuff like that. And I forget exactly who said it, but there's a sort of notion of, if you're going to share something, say something, ask yourself, is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? And is it helpful? And if it's not any of those things, then maybe you don't need to say it. And, it felt like very much in that moment, people were sharing things that were none of those things, and in fact, counter opposite to all of those things, which just added fuel to the proverbial fire, if you will, of panic and anger and so forth. In fact, there was a friend of mine, who kept texting me various, like, I don't know, videos and theories and stuff like that. And I had to yell at them where I said, like, listen, right now I'm checking my phone constantly. I'm getting text messages, I'm getting calls, I'm getting direct messages on social media. I'm checking all of it from my friends. You send me this stuff, this is not helpful. This does not help me. This does not help them, So to the extent that, like, we can just keep my lines open, stop sending me the shit, right? Like, just point blank, like, just stop. But yeah, so, in that way, that was disheartening to see kind of various people's, just ignorant takes, let's just say that in many ways. But the best way I felt like I could fight back about any of that stuff and give myself sense of agency was just to continue helping in the ways that I could. So, I went back to Pasadena this time to the Civic Center and then St. Andrew's Church, and kind of, helped there. The Civic Center was actually, they didn't need volunteers, but just seeing the line of people that needed help, right? Like that was very, it's a gut punch. It's a reality check for sure of, how many people have been impacted by these fires, your heart goes out to them. And, yeah, for sure you would want to wave a magic wand and, just magically fix certain things, but that's not reality. You can't do that. And, it was at this time that a lot of people that were safe started getting that sentiment of like, what can I do to help? And the sentiment was there. It just wasn't necessarily being channeled in the right way quite yet. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But anyway, Saturday essentially comes and goes, and there was that sort of notion of like, okay, where am I going to stay tonight? Do I continue couch hopping or do I not? And for me, luckily I had plenty of options from friends, but I kept telling them like, it'll be a game time decision. Once evening sort of hits, I'll assess the situation and see, where a safe location is, quote unquote. But luckily at that point, I was like, okay, I feel safe to go back to my apartment. Like, everything will, will still be packed and ready to like grab and go, that I need. And again, the majority of like the important other stuff that I don't need day to day is in Santa Barbara. So, I'll essentially be living out of a suitcase, even in my own home. And so that's what, Saturday into Sunday was. And Sunday is when I started watching the morning press conferences. They do these press conferences 8 a.m. They kind of update everything. So it made that a bit of a ritual to, make sure I was watching. But then, yeah, sort of went back to it. Like, there was this place that Marissa had kind of tipped me on to that needed essentially help sorting clothes, right? That was a big part of all of this was, thankfully a lot of people donated so much stuff, but it's all just in bags and every which way. And you want to help people, to find what they're looking for, right? And present it in a much better way. And so, we had gone in and just spent hours just, sorting stuff out, and whatnot. And it was this day that like, it started to hit me of like, that you can't, like, I'm always of the mindset, like it always hurts me in terms of the people you can't help. So what I mean by this is, we had so many baby clothes and adult clothes and whatnot, but there was this woman who had walked in and she was looking for clothes for like a 10-year-old kid. And it's like, we really don't have any, like we can give you a, kind of like an adult t-shirt and they can wear that, but it's not really meant for the kid. Like they're going to be swimming in it. And so that just, yeah, it tears at you when you like want to help. And it seems like such a simple thing in that moment, or conversely, like, I had reached out to the various people that I knew and, if they needed plate, like I had people willing to house people, but they were further away. And there was someone who had hit me up if I knew some place close to Pasadena because they needed to like stay there because of work. And, I reached out to people I knew in the area. I reached out to people who knew people in the area, and it just wasn't coming together. And I was like, and just, it's at those moments that you're like, crap, like, I can't help you, just that sort of direct interaction of it all. Like, forget like the larger context of like, again, wanting to help all these displaced people and rebuilding and so forth. But when you are seeing someone or interacting with someone on a one-on-one level and you can't help them, that sucks. That is, that is painful. It really is, So that was kind of a day. And then believe it or not, so, my car insurance I ended up switching car insurance that day. Now that was already pre-scheduled, to happen. However, my old insurance was supposed to be canceled and my new insurance was supposed to kick in. What ended up happening was that the old insurance kept, stayed on, and then the new insurance didn't kick in. So I had to like call, and get that sorted out. And thankfully, I said, hey, listen, like, I'm in the midst of this. I am exhausted. Like, I'm in the LA fires. Like, can you help me out here? And luckily they got it sorted, but nonetheless, because of, it ends up being cheaper if you prepay, 6 months instead of, doing it on a monthly basis. And so, to have that like hit of the actual like new car insurance, but also like the old car insurance. Yes, I'll get the old car insurance money back, once they process it, but like to have that like immediately, like in that moment be gone, like, hey, okay, not the best, like I'll get by and stuff like that. But, if there was like a more truer emergency, it might not be so good. So it's just, that was also a moment of like, life is continuing, and, it being Sunday, like I spoke with like my coworkers of like, hey, like, let's figure this out, with everyone affected and stuff like that. And anyone who's not in LA, like just have them be on the ready to like take over work, cause I said, even for me, like, even if I'm able to do work, the mental load of doing work is just, I may not be there. That was that. Now, my friend Stefan, him and I spoke, and he was essentially doing like a dinner at his place on Sunday to watch the football games. He's got 2 kids, his his, sister-in-law, brother-in-law, they've got kids. So they're, the cousins, they all like playing with each other and stuff like that. So, they were trying to keep it as normal as they could for the kids. And so he essentially invited me over for dinner and stuff like that. And, that was good. Like the kids themselves, they're young and they're crazy running around, but it was good because it like, the chaos was mundane chaos as opposed to like life and death chaos, if you will, so that was for sure welcome. And, just to see him and catch up and stuff like that. And, he's someone who like, he works with organizations and charities and stuff like that. He's been doing it for a decade, if not more. And so, we talked about kind of just helping and his experience and stuff like that. And he, I posted a video with him, on his perspective on things and talking about the longevity of this, like it's great that people, and it truly is, like, it's very appreciated that people are jumping in to help right away, for sure. But that's going to need to maintain itself for the long haul. It's not just, one weekend and done. Like, they're going to need volunteers continually, next week, third week, a month from now, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, all that stuff, So it's just kind of pacing yourself at that level. And then 2, kind of placing yourself in the shoes of that person and just presenting things in a much more dignified way, right? So as I mentioned, we were sort of organizing clothes. So that way, when people came in, it was, nicely stacked and, you knew which size was where, as opposed to just people just digging through, all this stuff and feeling already worse about themselves than they already were. And some people, I guess, at other places had like dropped off, like, shirts with holes and stains and stuff like that. And it's like, come on, like, help them rebuild, and give them some semblance of, that they're a human being, right? Sort of a thing. So how you, the way he put it, like how you give matters as much as also just giving. So that was Sunday. Then we're kind of heading into the week, and that's when like things started calming down. Because again, knowing that like there's literally so many states, Canada, Mexico here, and there was a few fires that cropped up, but those were put out, contained, stopped spreading. Like I'd mentioned my friend Mina Wahab, the reporter. There was actually a fire in Oxnard, not too far from where she lived, and yes, that was of course scary, but thankfully they stopped the spread, they put it out and all that. There's been a couple of other fires as well here and there, but yeah, they, the sentiment is a lot more confident. And, because of that, for me, it was starting to be an adjustment period of okay, there's work that needs to be done. There's still people I know that need help. So like, how do I go about this the best way? And as with the car insurance, there's all kinds of other life parts that continue on. So ironically, HelloFresh meal service thing was being delivered to my place. It's one of those, like, it's got all the ingredients with the recipe and you make the food, right? And I forgot, so I get this like once a month and I totally forgot that it was, so I was like, this is very cool. I don't know if I'll be able to make all these meals, like who knows? So, I ended up hitting up people of like, hey, would you want like this meal? Would you want that meal? Things of that nature. I even tried to like get it rerouted. I was like, hey, is it possible to like reroute this delivery to like some organization that would use it? Obviously it's a little bit different than just because it's like portioned out meals, and they're very specific. But unfortunately that didn't end up working. So, it got to me and, yeah, so then I, distributed as I could. But yeah, I started, sort of slipping into kind of trying to get to normalcy. All the shows that I've been working on touched upon the fires in one way, shape, or form, trying to offer help and solutions. So at least in that way, it felt both appropriate and more meaningful rather than just, button pushing, if you will, for lack of a better term. But yeah, I was talking, I text like various people and I was like, hey, like, do you feel equally exhausted? Like, you just do 30 minutes worth of work and you fall into a fatigue coma, like there was this residual, like even if people were getting decent sleep, like 8 hours of sleep, like it's not very restful sleep, right? And just the aftershock, if you will, of all of this, even if you're safe, it's still like, yeah, it's just, we all need rest and recuperation. But that's kind of, how things kind of went. I did go back to therapy on Wednesday, what I call day 9 of these fires. And, that was good. As I told my therapist, Chuck, it feels like a lifetime happened in the past week, and it really did, and the way that the whole sort of thing works is, it's muscle testing, and you always open up with how many negative charges are affecting you, like, consciously, if you will. And I had like over 1 million negative charges. And for context, like nowadays, mostly when I go in, I'll have 1, sometimes 2, maybe 3, depend if I've, if it's been a really stressful time, maybe like 4, 5, 6, like, stuff of that nature, right? Very rarely would it be above 10 nowadays. But over 1 million, that's quite a lot. And at that moment, you don't go after each negative thought individually. You look for the master charge, and I don't think it's any surprise that the master charge was like, everything is hopeless. And so we essentially worked on, getting rid of those sort of foundational thoughts, right? Now I can only imagine, right? Like, someone who has been to therapy, continues going to therapy and stuff like that. Just in my 1 week, I return and I have over 1 million negative charges. Imagine what, someone who hasn't gone to therapy, hasn't and this is not like a knock on them. It's just merely an observation of like, imagine the mental load they're working with, right? Like my heart goes out to them, in that capacity. So yeah, it's just, like it was a really good session, but there was a lot there to like unearth and get through. And then thankfully later in the, like I was actually supposed to, I made mention of, the foster dog Diamond. I still keep in touch with the owner, and I get Diamond every so often, spend time with her at my place and keep her for a few days. And I was actually supposed to have her for this past week, but obviously with everything we, just canceled that. But I was like, hey, can I come over and just kind of, play fetch with her or whatever? And, it was good to see Diamond for, the hour or so. And her living her best life, there. So, so that was fun. But yeah, there's a lot, and sort of taking the larger view of it. I know I've given you sort of a lot there, and how helpful it is to anyone, I don't know. But taking more of the bird's eye view, one of the things I look at is like, we put a man on the moon, right? Because we wanted to. We put time and attention into that. And so when we're at our best, if we focus, we can achieve incredible things. At our worst, we are greedy, we're panicky, and we ruin the earth. And if we're to do something about any of this, whether it's the rebuilding, whether it's just being more prepared here in LA, but also in the larger whole, like these natural disasters continue to be in greater frequency, in greater negative effect to people. We got to start to really think about this, in ways that are actually helpful, right? When I talk about like seeing the early misinformation and seeing like fire experts and stuff like that. And listen, I'm not saying that people here in LA aren't culpable to X, Y, and Z. And in fact, my knock with any politician really is that there's just always finger pointing, right? There's never a true leader that says, okay, like this is now my responsibility. I'm going to figure this out, right? It just, rather than that, everyone just ends up pointing fingers at, who's responsible for what. And that's not helpful. That's not what's going to get us through any of this. But, as far as LA, I'm certainly not the first or the last person to, like, building here is, the land is fire prone, there is this notion that we as humans think we can conquer anything, and we can't. We don't have domain over everything. In fact, if anything now, the mentality needs to shift to becoming better stewards of the land and with the land. Because, we can do preparation all we want, but we also, the bigger macro side of it we need to live in harmony with all of this, and, the fact of the matter is, like LA, right? We ported over non-native plants and and like all these factors have not helped. And so, yeah, we need to rethink both small scale and large scale of how we're going to tackle this. But that also takes, clear thinking. It takes non-divisive thinking. Like, when you consider that like potential aid could be withheld with conditions and stuff like that, it's like, that's not very helpful. And some people are saying that California should withhold, federal taxes because we give to red states and so forth. And, to what degree, how all that is applicable. Like, listen, none of that matters. Like, if ultimately the federal government wants to withhold aid from California, that fucking sucks. A, but B, it just shows more of who they are. And I don't think us withholding, anything from anyone else is right either. That it's just not great. So yeah, we just have to kind of reconfigure the approach and whatnot. Now, speaking of kind of approaches, it has been interesting to, everyone, right, is trying to find a sense of normalcy. Now, that also means for everyone, that definition is very different. If you don't have a home, your sense of trying to get to normalcy is going to be vastly different than someone like myself. And so I think part of that as we approach this is reading the room. It's the whole business as usual. We just have to have some grace and humility. Like there's the joke email that, hell, maybe someone has sent an email like this of like, hey, hope your house didn't burn down. By the way, I need that report by the end of the day. Can you get it to me? Like, we just have to, we just have to figure out how to approach this. And again, I think when doing it from a place of grace and stuff like that, like I know with my projects, I'm starting to rethink mentally how to continue them because I do think ultimately, for example, whether it's my movie, I think it's important to continue with it, both for the spirit of it, but also, that can hire people who need jobs and stuff like that, right? But I also know that I have to rethink how to go about it. So anyone in LA, I'm like, okay, we're not gonna, if people reach out to us that they want to, help fund the movie and get it off the ground, great. But in terms of financing, at the moment, we're going to seek it internationally, right? And whatnot. And we're going to do that. And we'll kind of readjust as things go on. But right now, just trying to read the room as much as possible. And same thing with my team of like, anyone that's outside of LA, I'm okay to work with and continue on the project and pushing forward. Whereas, the people in LA, I'm like, if I'll let me know when they're ready to like, work and stuff like that, if you will. But also it's got me, rethinking my approach to things. So even before this, I've been rethinking my, like a travel setup, like I've watched a lot of influencers talk about their travel kit, right? And they'll have like a ring light, their one computer and a tiny hard drive, and they're off, jet setting every which way, now between, this and also, that previous notion, I've started to kind of rethink, just having more redundancy in terms of my data protection, which, everything has always been safe, backed up and then in the cloud and stuff like that. But just doing it on an even greater, more conscious level and organizing it a little bit better. And then also essentially, I haven't gotten all the components yet, but I will kind of do my mobile setup. And so what I'm looking at is essentially, having a monitor, a separate keyboard, mouse, separate cables, but, so I use a Mac Mini primarily. So what I would do is I would pack up my hard drives, pack up the Mac Mini and take it and go, and then have, my road stuff, right? So the monitor, the keyboard, so that would all be separate. And the cables, rather than have to unplug everything that's here at the home setup, I have that for the road. So kind of thinking about it in that way, and whatnot. So yeah, what this next week brings will be sort of interesting. We're all collectively processing, a very traumatic event for sure, and trying to get back on the other side of it in the best way we know how, supporting people we can, and that's where we're at, so I'll talk, as it continues to evolve, I'll talk about it, but just, the first week of this, felt literally like a lifetime. So, and given the length of this episode, a lot to unpack for sure. Happy to answer any questions. I don't know if you would, or, whatever else, but, let me know. I'm happy to answer what I can, maybe do a follow-up episode based on something that might need to be expanded upon, whatever else. But to the extent that I can, I'm trying to, both continue to be involved with volunteer work, slipping back into my work habits, and then continuing with the projects that I've got going on. And funny enough, before the fires happened, I had scheduled out Patreon posts and Substack posts that I had written. So those are available. One in particular on my Patreon, I posted the behind the scenes making of the proof of concept that we made for my feature film that, we're in the process of getting financing for. So if you're interested in that, you can either sign up to be, you can sign up on a monthly fee of $10 and you get all the various posts that are there. Or Patreon is now doing it where essentially you can just buy a post, and that's it. So, if you're just interested in watching them behind the scenes, you can buy it for a price there too. So, whichever one you choose. Anyway, as always, thank you truly for taking time to listen. One of the things I should also do is, write out, I guess, a list of resources. But the Red Cross in general is a great organization. And they're doing a lot here. So if if you're looking to donate, if you're looking to be involved from afar, do that. I post a lot on my social media in terms of people's GoFundMes and, organizations that are helping. And luckily, there's that side of it. As crappy as this is, obviously, crappy is just doesn't do it any justice in terms of the horrific nature of it. But seeing the community come together is a bright spot, a much needed bright spot, right? I wouldn't call it a silver lining, quite exactly, but the fact that people are there for each other is a wonderful thing. So, thank you, and I'll talk to you next time.